Dear students, welcome to my classroom on Chinese history. Today I will be giving you some ideas on modern and contemporary Chinese art. I will be discussing the paintings of certain painters along with their life sketch, and I hope you will enjoy the lecture and it will help you to understand the evolution of modern Chinese art from 1912 to 1949 and so on. I'm talking about the artists who created a new visual language that embodies aspects of traditional Chinese art while responding to a time of great transition. Their artworks express personal beliefs, national pride, and international awareness. I would like to start with Zhang Daiquan. Zhang Daiquan's mother taught him to paint flowers when he was a child. At the age of 19, he left his native Sichuan province and went to Kyoto to study textile weaving and dyeing. When he returned to China in 1919, he lived in Shanghai and Suzhou, where he immersed himself in the study of traditional painting. Between 1940 and 1943, he studied, catalogued, and made copies of the brilliantly colored wall paintings of the Buddhist cave temples, mostly 5th to 10th century, in the western oasis of Don Wang. He had a very famous painting which is known as Lotus. If you can search in Google, you will be able to find the image of that famous painting, Lotus, by Zhang Daiquan. The next artist is Tang Di, a native of Wuxian or Jiangsu province. He was the great-grandson of the renowned scholar-painter Tang Yifeng. Though accomplished in painting, calligraphy, and poetry, he prided himself most on his knowledge of psychonomy. In Beijing, where he lived for many years, he was active as a teacher as well as an artist. His works are also of immense repute and recognition. The third artist whom I would like to highlight, he is Wai Dong. Fusion abounds in the art of Wai Dong. He draws from a wide variety of sources, including Ming and Qing landscape painting, socialist realism, or the official style of political propaganda under Chairman Mao Zedong, Leonardo da Vinci, and others. Socialist realism was a major component of his high school art program, even after the death of Mao. But Wai's art often subverts the Mao era agenda. For instance, in Neighbor Girls with Fever, a female wearing a blue government tunic appears in a potentially compromising situation. He is passionate about ink painting, which he sees as a critical element of Chinese identity. Young people in China, I quote, he says, "No one knows how to use ink on paper. It is terrible. But I think it's very important. You are Chinese. You must know this." Unquote. In my next slide, I have given a picture which was drawn by this particular artist, and if you see the picture you will be able to understand like how brilliant is painting and how he has used brush painting to make his painting more realistic. The next artist was Diang Yong. He showed promise in painting and calligraphy from a young age. In 1920, he left for Japan to study modern Western art at the Tokyo School of Fine Arts, where he was influenced by the work of Henri Matisse and the Faviers. Ding was also an avid collector of Chinese art. In the 1930s, he returned to a traditional Chinese ink style, for which he was heavily criticized by Chinese artists who saw traditional painting as a dead end. During this period, he was particularly inspired by the 17th century painter Ba Da Shan Ren, who went into self-imposed exile. This association would become more relevant to Ding during the communist takeover in 1949. Ding fled to Hong Kong, where he spent the rest of his life. Despite these circumstances, his artwork was often light-hearted and joyful. In my next slide, I am showing you a painting by this particular artist where you can see how his joyfulness was reflected on paper. The next artist is Qiu Ziaofei, who graduated in 2002 from the Central Academy of Fine Art in Beijing, where he learned traditional painting. His musician friends later exposed him to contemporary art. Qiu's work focuses on memory and history. The surfaces of his sculptures emphasize a painterly quality and are thus called sculpture painting. The subject is often a toy or other object from his childhood. Qiu explains, I quote, "During the early 2000s, Beijing was developing especially quickly. During that time, I would often paint these things from my childhood as a way to go back in time. It was an act of nostalgia, a way to slow down time." Unquote. In my next slide, you will be able to see like how he has painted on a toy which is definitely nostalgic and also is helping us to understand how he tried to have time travel. The next painter was Zhang Xuqiang, who demonstrated artistic prowess at an early age and graduated at 18 from the prestigious Central Academy in Beijing. He studied there with Zhu Beihong, a master of 20th century Chinese painting who combined traditional Chinese painting techniques with Western realism. Zhang embraced this blending of artistic influence and became a teacher at the Academy in 1952, only 2 years after his graduation. However, the Cultural Revolution intervened and Zheng was sent to the countryside for re-education. Like Ni Wo and Hu Wong Kai, this forced experience of peasant life had a strong impact on his art. Later, when working in Tibet, he was drawn to nomadic culture and especially horses and workers, now prominent subjects in his work. In the next slide, you can see how he has drawn a horse, and which is also helping us to understand his love and passion for nomadic life or for realistic things or objects. Now I will ask you a quiz, as we have dealt with some of the aspects of modern Chinese art. My question is, in which aspect China excelled since the traditional period? Number 1, brush painting. Number 2, painting with ink. Number 3, oil painting. Number 4, painting with pastel colors. The answer would be number 2, that is painting with ink or ink painting. The next artist was Ni Wo, who was born in 1948 at Shenyang. He encountered Western art at an early age, but initially avoided traditional Chinese art. She attended the Beijing Youth Palace, a preparatory school that incorporated Western art into the curriculum. In 1969, she was sent to a small farm in Datong as a part of the Cultural Revolution agenda for re-educating urban youth. Based on her experiences in Datong, peasant life became a prominent subject in her work. Only after her return to Beijing did Ni express interest in learning Chinese painting techniques. Ni used an abstract style to merge contemporary peasant figures with traditional ink techniques and landscape elements. In my next slide, you will be able to see one painting by this particular artist where she tried to show the village life with the usage of ink, color, and also with some kind of surrealism. That means some abstract objects are also there, which can make her painting more, what I can say, more artistic and definitely more thought-provoking. The next artist is Zhu Wei, who is born in 1966. He preserves his cultural heritage with pride. He says, I quote, "I have always tried to use traditional Chinese elements because we have thousands of years of history. From the beginning, I have been trying to show how to modernize the past." Unquote. To this effect, he uses Zuan paper and fine brush techniques from traditional ink painting. He updates the convention of stamping work with one's name to include large red seals on his paintings with his website and gallery information. Zhu also modernizes a specific Chinese painting, Han Wang's famous 5 oxen, an exemplar of animal painting from the Tang dynasty. Zhu preserves the expressive eyes from the earlier model, but gives the oxen a greater sense of physical and cultural significance with the vast scale. So, in my next slide, you will be able to see that picture of oxen, and which is also filled with the emotion and artistic skill of the artist who tried to renovate or rejuvenate the particular spirit or zeal of the previous painter who drew it. And also here you will be able to find the usage of stamp as well. The next artist is Q Desu, who was born in 1948 at Shanghai, who studied traditional ink painting and seal carving. That means carving characters into a small stone, which is then used to stamp a signature or other identifying mark onto a painting. During the Cultural Revolution, he was employed in Shanghai as an art worker. After China instituted its reform and opening policies of 1978, Q and other artists were freed from many of the strict restrictions that were previously placed on art. He began experimenting with contemporary ink and wash painting and spent 3 years trying to develop a contemporary style and theory. In 1982, while taking a walk, Q noticed a cracked slab of stone on the ground. He found the cracks, I quote, crudely charming and natural and quite calm, unquote. He began to notice similar cracks in everything from the smallest cell to the composition of the cosmos, and his artistic technique of fissuring was born. The technique entails applying paint to a sheet of Zhuan paper, the traditional medium of ink and wash painting, which he then tears to expose the white canvas beneath. Fissuring allows Q to explore traditional ink painting by inverting compositional elements, using the seal style for the full picture plane and the passive medium as an expressive tool. In this painting, you will find like how brilliantly he has applied these techniques and has made it more innovative and interesting, and definitely a piece of fine art. In one of the previous paragraphs, I have said thought-provoking, but instead of thought-provoking, it would be thought-provoking. So now we will be discussing about another artist whose name was Yo Peng. He was exposed to art at an early age by his family and visits to the nearby National Palace Museum. He studied a variety of artistic media during high school, including ink and oil painting, drawing and pottery. After travels in Athens and mainland China. Early in his career, he chose to pursue ink painting. His compositions are often crowded and disproportional. Scholars often describe his brush strokes as unorthodox, childlike, or awkward. You cite the influence of Zhou, deliberate awkwardness esteemed by Chinese literati. Taiwanese folk art, especially the theatrical rituals connected with weddings and funerals, has also been a strong influence on his art. Shadow puppet plays have long been a favorite of his as both a spectator and performer. Yu's interest in popular art and theatricality has a loosening effect on the constraints of traditional ink painting. He also infuses his art with personal experience, suggesting that the little Yu here might be self-referential. Yu's unique style fuses elements of traditional Chinese ink painting, Taiwanese folk art, and contemporary life. You can see in this slide like how he has drawn the picture of perhaps of the mother with her children and how all of them are engaged in work. Perhaps they are engaged in work in a paddy field or somewhere else. It can give you a picture of how he brilliantly has used the brush and also the application of ink is something which is making this picture more realistic and also more thought-provoking. The next artist is Xiao Ping, who employs traditional techniques and subjects for his landscape, bird and flower, and figure paintings. He is also an expert in the techniques and theory of calligraphy. His training in art appraisal adds another dimension to his knowledge of the Chinese artistic tradition. In 1962, he began his career as a researcher and art appraiser for the Palace Museum in Nanjing and has since consulted on Chinese ancient collections in museums all over the world. Incorporating different types of brush strokes for the paintings and script for the calligraphy, the two works what demonstrate his ideas were extremely superb and definitely were an example of his technical versatility. So here we find his one of the pictures where we find that how he has used various strokes of brush and has made this painting an example of surrealism blended with his passion and fineness for fine art. The next artist, Zhu Lele, who is a member of the School of New Scholar Painting, a group of artists in Jiangsu province dedicated to rediscovering Chinese artistic traditions. Historical texts on Chinese art frequently classified paintings by the social status of the artist. Traditional scholar painting refers to works painted by highly educated and cultivated scholars, emerging at a time in the 1980s when Chinese artists were turning away from tradition and moving toward Western art. The new scholar painting movement strove to make traditional scholar painting relevant to contemporary times. To this end, Zhu employs long-established traditional painting techniques and formats such as the painted fan, which I am going to show in my next slide, that you would be able to find that how he has made that blend or that combination here. With her clear, soft touch, she depicts ancient scholars and environments, while also expressing pleasure in the act of painting and aspects of her daily life. I like this painting by this particular artist. It's the painting of a fan which she uses in her daily life, but it's also having an artistic meaning that it is very much sober, diligent, and also soothing for our eyes, and also is helping us to understand how this lady painter has tried the application of her feminine skill to this particular field of art to make it more delicate and more palatable for the art lovers. The next artist whom I am going to talk is Hu Wong Kai, who learned about Western art as a student at the Central Academy of Fine Arts of Beijing. The program emphasized Western oil painting, and he was drawn to the work of Paul Gauguin and Vincent van Gogh in particular. During the Cultural Revolution, Hu and his staff at the Shanghai Animation Film Studios were sent to the countryside south to Shanghai. Like Ni Wo and Zheng Shangqing, agrarian life had a profound impact on his art. When not performing hard labor, Hu sketched the village people and buildings around him and incorporated these images into his later work. So this is the picture which will help you to understand like how this particular artist has tried to incorporate his simplicity, where he is giving emphasis on village life, and perhaps here we find like two women, they are talking to each other, and perhaps it is having an inner meaning. So I hope my students, they have enjoyed this lecture along with the illustration of the pictures which were drawn by most of the painters whom I have discussed here. Thank you.